Hi guys, and welcome back to the Rugby Abroad Podcast. I'm Sam Katz, as always sharing first-hand rugby experiences from around the globe. In episode 24, we're joined by my ex-OBU coach from Wellington, that's Old Boys University in New Zealand, Paddy Cyclops Gough. He's made a name for himself not just on the rugby fields of Wellington or as an expert in the human resource field, but he's also been carving out a new path in the land of the rising sun, Japan of course. We'll explore Paddy's rugby journey, coaching experiences, his move to Japan and adapting to their unique rugby scene. Get ready for an exciting international rugby coach's story. If you're enjoying the pod, please hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening and drop us some likes on socials to stay updated with our latest episodes and content. And check out our merchandise at rugbyabroad.com. Welcome back guys to the Rugby Abroad Podcast. Absolute pleasure to be back with you today in spring in Spain. Pretty sure it's similar kind of season over in Japan. We're going to speak today to Paddy Gough, experienced coach and rugby man, well travelled as well. Paddy, great to have you with us today, or as I know you, Cyclops, but we'll get into that. How are you, mate?
Yeah. Hi Sammy, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks so much for coming on today. Brilliant to be back with you guys as well, the listeners, and to be able to bring you a great story, one of many successes, and just wanted to briefly get into Paddy's story. So I met Paddy a good 10 years ago, if not more. We were speaking the other day, and God, how does time fly? You were my head coach, Paddy, at OBU, Old Boys Uni, over in Wellington, New Zealand, when I came over for a season. And what an experience that was for me. I just wanted to kind of push you into telling us about your early days and how you got into rugby. Where did your love for the game come from?
Yeah, I fell in love with it when I was about 14, and like a lot of Kiwi kids, I'd tried all kinds of sports before that. So I'd regularly played soccer and softball and hockey and things like that, just a variety of ball games. And switched over to rugby just largely like a lot of kids around that age, influenced by my mates, and that's the way they were all heading. Loved it. I mean, I'll probably stopped growing at 14, I've been 5'10" since then, and so I was a lock in the early days, and as everybody else caught up, you just shift positions. So I ended up playing Premier in Bay of Islands, Kerikeri, which is in the far north of NZ, and that's a pretty rugged competition for a young fella. You're surrounded by all kinds of farmers, good diverse mix of players, you'd say, in all kinds of ages. Like you'd be playing alongside uncles and cousins. There was one Premier team I was in where there was a father and a son was the first five. So like you get all kinds, but the quality is pretty high.
Love
it. Yeah. So I fell in love with it. Then ended up playing down in Wellington after university. Briefly played premiers and did a lot of time with senior ones for OBU. Loved the club and stuck around, and after I finished playing, ended up running a Premier Reserve side from the sidelines, and that then led to Colts coaching, senior ones coaching and Prems coaching where I met you.
Yeah, mate. Oh, what a time. And I just remember from that year group that I was in shock at the amount of talent that was on display just in that Premier league in Wellington. I'd struggled myself to get a game. I think I managed about 4 or 5 appearances for the Prem team, but the likes of Lima Sapuaga, TJ Ioane, and these guys. How was that? And just tell us, like, you can. It's not many people can go from playing into coaching so smoothly, I guess. And it sounds like you just naturally went on that journey. How did that come about, and then what was it like coaching some of these players who've gone on to be, top internationals, playing in the top leagues around the world? Who would have thought that would have happened? Or did you see that coming?
I I probably didn't see it coming, but I loved it, and I mean, I've always felt really privileged over it. I guess like them, like kind of the model in Wellington at that time was there was amazing talent coming through high school rugby and college rugby. We were very lucky. OBU had close connection to Wellington College, and at that time, kind of mid 2010s, if you like, through to 2015, they were one of the strongest programs in the country. So you get guys like Lima Sokoranga and Hanapale Nalo and this sort of thing coming out of school, and they were already on the fringe of NZ under-20s, and they played NZ schools and this sort of stuff. So you were getting those players. To be fair, as I've kind of come through Colts and senior ones, you could see that level of players in Premier team already, like we had Conrad Smith, Jason Spice, these sort of guys. So we had high standard guys already. One of the things I always loved about OBU, probably because it fitted with my Bay of Island, Northland, small town, smaller club background, was the way those guys, even though they were playing at that highest level, Wellington, Hurricanes, Super Rugby, All Blacks, some of them, whenever they got the chance, they'd come back and play club.
Yeah.
Which was a lot of fun.
You just reminded me of a game. Obviously, I use this when I'm talking about my rugby career to this day, when I'm introducing myself. One of the first things I probably say is, I actually played a match with Conrad Smith. And exactly. And I remember specifically using him as a decoy runner, and about 4 or 5 defenders fixed on him, and he gave it to me back out the back, just nonchalant, no look pass, and I went in under the post for a try. That was one of my Prem's matches that I was able to play over under your leadership. So what an amazing thing to say, and to have those guys at such a professional level coming down and imparting their knowledge on young boys coming through. That it almost makes people's careers in essence. Having the chance to play with that quality of player, such an amazing thing. And like you said, you didn't even have to push them to do that. That came naturally from them. And what about your foray into coaching? How did you become the coach you are today?
So on the career side, on the work side, I had an HR background, and I'd quite deliberately gone into a role that required high interaction with people. All through school, a little bit open here, all through school I'd stammered terribly till I was about 21, couldn't even introduce myself. And if you've got hard consonants in your name like Pat, and where else do you have to talk to more people than in an HR career or when you're managing people? So I kind of followed that path and quickly got into leadership roles, and really enjoyed the leadership side of helping other people come through and achieve what they wanted, and trying to influence their performance. And combined with a passion for rugby, it was just a natural fit, I think. Got some really good opportunity and support through that. For you remember we had Dave Loveridge Trapper, the famous All Black halfback at the club, and he was kind of leading the coaching team. He kind of brought me through Colts and then senior ones, and then joined him with premiers before taking that over, and he just helped me succeed through stuff. So that's how it all started. Wellington's got a really strong methodology around coach development. They put you through some good programs. So a foundation of coaching into the more advanced stuff. And as you get to that more advanced stuff, you have to put time and commitment into it. And that's where, there's a strong bit of networking then. Suddenly there's other top players or top coaches that you're getting exposed to, and that's all pretty exciting as well. So, that's how I got there, hung in there, and I've loved it. I've had a variety of roles: head coaching, assistant coaching. I'm an assistant coach now, and probably I prefer it, to be honest. Head coach role has changed over time, and it's got a really high management, campaign, organisation component to it now. I really enjoy getting on the field with the guys now. So
awesome. And what about Cyclops, the nickname? Tell us how that came about, if you don't mind.
The versions of that story, but it comes normally comes phrased with one-eyed monster yarn, and whether that's a one-eyed view of the world or whatever. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay, good man. Let's keep it PG, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, fair play. And I guess, the reason for this podcast is people are moving abroad more and more with their rugby, traveling the world, having these brilliant experiences, and I think you're an absolutely prime example of this. We mentioned when we spoke recently about you had an experience in the States, and now you're obviously in Japan. These are two totally different environments for rugby, and also totally different to New Zealand, where obviously you did your formation as a coach. So tell us a bit about that, about your experiences abroad. How did you end up making that decision? Was it an easy decision to make? Obviously, you're married, so how does that kind of take its toll when making these kind of decisions? You had an HR career as well. Was this something in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it probably does. There's pressure in some way in that you're removing yourself from your main career, if you like, while you do that, and you try and grow something else. But I probably had an ideal situation that I've got a wife who's absolutely passionate about rugby as well. Her father did a lot of coaching in Fiji when she was young, and so she's always been a really strong supporter. Arguably, it was part of my election process, but it's certainly worked out in my favour. So she's absolutely been open to me exploring these opportunities when they've come up. The other bit of it is completely have to start again when you come back. I tend to operate as a senior consultant now, so you can leave that for 6 months or longer and still come back to it and have the same relationships that work opportunity. Yeah. So the first opportunity outside NZ was to the US in Chicago, and that connection came about through Mike Tolkien, was the US Eagles coach at the time. He'd led them through, must have been the 2011 World Cup in NZ, and was keen for a couple of players to have a NZ rugby experience on the back of that. So he sent two to OBU after meeting Trapper, Dave Loveridge, and so we ended up getting the coach Eric Fry, who went on and played 3 World Cups for them, played in various other countries. I think you might have come across him as well, in France or somewhere, yeah?
Yeah, that's right. I think he was playing up in Vannes in the north of France when I was playing down on the south coast in Béziers. I'm sure. Absolute unit of a man, wasn't he?
Yeah, it's incredible. Incredibly strong for starters, and that was kind of one of the first things that I picked up about US rugby was how far ahead they are in terms of their conditioning work. Like it was easy as Kiwi to be a little bit arrogant going over there and think, US rugby is not as evolved as Kiwi rugby, but man, in some areas they absolutely were, and obviously quickly catching up in other areas. So met Eric through the coaching. That led to further conversations around US opportunities, and one came up with the Chicago Griffins, who are one of the main 2 men's clubs in Chicago. This is all before Major League Rugby, although I got to meet a lot of the players and that when I was over there. But yeah, it was a fascinating experience, that's for sure.
How good. And then that led directly to the call from Japan, or was there some time in between where you could gather your thoughts?
No, there was definitely some time in between. Yes, and some really interesting stuff to reflect on around that US experience as well. I guess one of, like you get told, there will be a vehicle in the role and accommodation and that sort of thing, but the level that some of the American clubs are operating on is almost Kiwi in a way, in that they're doing everything they can, but before Major League Rugby, maybe it was at a different level. So yes, there was a vehicle involved, but it was a van that had a scrum machine in the back that we would drive from field to field, and it had a scaffolding platform on the top that you'd have to use to set up your cameras on the field. We'd have Fridays where we were out there marking the field up in the middle of some open space because you couldn't always find a good rugby field to play on. Obviously, that stuff shifted hugely. So there was that sort of stuff, but seeing how much the kind of rugby community embrace that and their kind of commitment to it was great to watch. So that probably opened me up to, okay, the next time an overseas opportunity comes up, I'll certainly get into it. But it came back in time to join OBU again. At that stage, went into assistant coach role with OBU Premiers, and we had Jeremy Little in charge at the moment, and Jamie Williams had come in as well. He ended up very successful at OBU. It was kind of the start of a winning period where where we finally won the Jubilee Cup after a number of years and won it several times over the next few years as well. That was great, and that attracts more talented players as well. And, by then got the Wes Oosens and the Adam Hills, who played Hurricanes, and Ben May, who played Japan and New Zealand Māori and Hurricanes, all willing to join in as well. It's fantastic stuff.
Oh, fantastic. Your experience in Japan started at some point. When did you actually get the call? Was it when they heard how well the OBU Premier team was going, or was this something that an opportunity came up for a contact by someone in your network, from there? It so often does, doesn't it, with rugby?
Right, it's incredible, eh? And I mean, even top coaches like Jason Ryan and that with the All Blacks at the moment, they talk about there actually isn't a coaching pathway that you count on, and so opportunity can come from a number of angles. And for me, for the Japan stuff, again, it came through a network connection. So Ross Kennedy, who'd played Super Rugby in NZ as well, ITM, played for OBU, and who I'd coached as well. He did a short stint here, so he's with a Christchurch High School now, and they have a connection to the university. I'm with Kyoto Sangyo University in Japan. He'd come over and done a specialist coaching gig there. Here they call them spot coaches. He'd come and done a line-out for his gig for a week. They loved it and asked him to come back permanently. He wasn't in a position to, but he said, I know somebody who can. And it kind of opened up out of that, yeah.
Wow. I mean, this is it, isn't it? Rugby is so often the case that making use of your network and just being available at the right time, I guess. What was that like for you? Did you just pack bags and that was it? You were off again in the same way that you went off to New Zealand? To America, or was this more of a okay, I've got to think about this? Or initially, was it a temporary role, or did you know the permanence of it straight away?
Yeah, so initially it was a 1-year gig. So this was 2017 season. My main concern at the time was I was coming towards the back OBU season that was going really successfully. So I was just hoping that they'd let me finish that. And of course, they wanted me there for their long training season. But things worked out, and the day of OBU playing and winning the final, I was on a plane to Japan. Probably the difference was coming to a country where I knew English wasn't the natural language, and concerns around that and what kind of support I was going to have around that. But ultimately, you got to take a risk on these things, and just do your best when you get there.
Yeah, and how was that culturally? It's probably a big culture shock. Japan is very distinct, and not just culturally in terms of general culture, but rugby culture especially. I imagine there's some big differences there, and a lot of learning to take place, especially from your point of view. But I mean, you were really open to that, and tell us a bit about the differences in rugby style and maybe coaching methods.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating environment to work on, to work in. I probably need to distinguish between rugby's big in high schools here, and it's big at universities, and it's big at top league, and probably the three are quite different. At high school, Japanese players kind of commit to one sport. We spoke earlier about the multiple sports I'd played through my youth, and most Kiwis do, and I think it happens with guys like you in the UK and that as well. If you're Japanese and you choose a sport, then that's your sport through high school, and you're expected to stick with it, and you're just focused on the skill sets within that one sport, really. So then you get those guys come to university, and a lot of the training practices, which are long training, repetitive, physical, you're expected to really put yourself out there physically. Very compliant, very coach-led. You're expected to listen to and respect your coach, listen to and respect to any elder players, and obviously that happens at university, where you get your 4 years. But then, of course, they get through university and they make top league, and they're more exposed to Western coaching methods. Yeah. Plus having the Japanese environment as well, but getting to work that in, I guess. Yeah, so my first university experience, really interesting. Came that first year, hop off the plane, and the physio, who's also the translator, is chatting to me as he takes me to the ground for the first time, and he said, "Oh, Sensei, the Kantoko, who'd had the job for 40 years, Sensei loves scrums." And I said, "Oh, that's great," because they brought me as full coach. "I love scrums too." And he looked a bit uncomfortable, and he explained to me, "No, Sensei loves scrums, so you won't be touching them." And I thought, so they brought me as an aerial coach. This is gonna be a whole new challenge.
Yeah.
But he has great, and probably that was a key cultural learning for me, to have patience with that.
Yeah.
And so I spent months basically with my hands behind my back watching the Kantoko run scrum sessions, some of which would go for well over an hour and just be repetitive 8v8, which was their preferred training method back then. But over time, you make some gains together, or he sees you do some stuff that he likes and gets more and more trust. And we kind of got to a point where the freshman had just joined us for the start of the next season, and I was still finishing that first-year contract, and he'd seen something which frustrated. He wanted to go over and work with the first years. So he told me to take the senior pack, and the whole field stopped. Like, you've got, we must have about 120 kids there, working through training on one field, forwards and backs. Everybody stopped and stared, and I couldn't figure out what went on, so I just ran scrums. And afterwards, the coaches explained to me the first time he's ever let a Gaijin, somebody from outside the country, touch his scrum. So obviously I made enough of an impression that I was trusted. Yeah, and I guess that played out in that they brought me back, and I remember my second gig here with Kyoto Sanyo University and my second season of that. Looking for a big year this year.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So it was a game of patience, to say the least. I mean, I can compare it with my own experience in Spain, to be honest. But I think it took me a bit longer to get used to how things were done here. I think it was probably more of a club thing than a Spanish rugby culture thing, whereby, as an English 10, you're taught to control the game, lead the team, make important decisions. And I remember going to Spain, and I was in one of the, probably halfway through the season, I was in a team run, just trying to implement, the coach's tactics and the set plays that we were going to do on the weekend. And I remember just getting into a shouting match with the coach, because he was saying, no, this is my club, my rules, my. And I was just like, as an English 10 brought up in that environment where we're taught to kind of control the team, lead the team. The coach sits out. You're sort of, from my point of view, I was helping the coach do his job, and that's always how we're taught. But yeah, they just didn't want to know. It was just a completely different mindset. So I think that was a big learning process. I think it took me about a year to get used to that. And then I mean, much of the same stuff here. And I mean, you'll hear top players complain that they've been brought here, and they could be an international superstar, and they go into one of the top league clubs, and yet nobody's listening to the way they want to do things and their recommendations. To be fair, it's a different mindset. There's a couple of things going on in the Japanese context. One is hierarchy is very important. Commitment and ownership is very important. You got to remember, years and years after the war, Japan's very insular as well, in terms of our way is the only way. All of that's shifting, and for them, it probably feels like it's shifting incredibly fast. So I mean, you've got to be open to that. And I mean, it's going on throughout the rugby community here. One of the fascinating things that I hadn't really got my head around, that I've come to understand here, is there's a number of what I would call really courageous Polynesian guys come over in their last year of high school, and they come without any Japanese language behind them, and they go total immersion for a year or 2 years into high school. They've left their families at, 15 years old or whatever, moved to the other side of the world into an environment that they can't even communicate. They do the hard yards, play some rugby, and that's enough to set them up for a university opportunity where they'll be supported into university study. We've got a number of boys like that. The Tongans in particular do very well, but Samoans, Fijians, there was a Kiwi kid here
first time I was here as well. Really take my hat off to those guys. And times where you might get frustrated as a coach, you think, oh, what have those guys been through, and it kind of moderates your feeling around a little bit more. But so, I mean, yes, there's huge cultural learnings in playing abroad anywhere. I think you've got to really work to fit into it and pick your battles. Like there'll be times where your way would be really helpful. And for me, it's about trying to find other ways to influence that and attack that. And there's times where you've absolutely got to stand there and go, no, we're doing this, like it or not. But there's other times where you work behind the scenes and get and you influence people. In Japan, it's pretty standard to talk over an idea with a coach and with another coach, and next thing it's kind of presented as their idea, and you've got to be that as a win, that is a success.
Yeah.
The idea's been taken on board.
That's so often the case, not only in rugby, but I think in working environments as well. Know when to take those wins when they're on offer, even if they don't seem like wins for yourself at the time. Nicking your idea, but yeah, what about Japanese rugby? Obviously, it's come off the back of some great times in terms of the international side, hosting a World Cup recently. Obviously, COVID's probably taken the sails out of its wings a little bit. What are your thoughts on like where Japanese rugby needs to improve? Are you allowed to speak about this kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think it's a really challenging environment. I mean, one of the things that you would have picked up from your NZ experience was there's really fast progression. It's probably the same in the UK, right? There's really fast progression for a talented college or high school player into high-performance environments. So like people like Lima and Wes Oisin and those sort of things that join the club. Yeah. And on one level, they're getting stretched because they're only 17, 18 years old and they're playing to men, often much bigger, at club level. But then they're also getting high-performance coaching because they're in academies or they're already brought into provincial and higher teams like Wellington Lions or Hurricanes and that sort of thing. Over here, you don't get that. So largely, if you finish high school rugby, then you come to university rugby in Japan. And that means until you're kind of 23-ish, you're getting the coaching at our level. And that coaching has been just very insular until now. Certainly, I've met a number of other people that have come into the Japanese university coaching environment, either as spot coaches, the occasional ones stayed in for the longer term, as I have, I guess, and has then moved on to other things. But yeah, I think there's some real strengths to their play at university level, but I think it probably affects the top level as well. And I mean, you hear stories about, even at that top league level, it's a company-based system. So, Mitsubishi, Toyota, etc. It isn't uncommon for the national team to want to do something, but a player be kept from them because he's got to play in a competitive club game or pre-season club game and that. So imagine being at that level again where you're trying to influence that. So I just sit back and I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah, it's so nice to hear. You're learning about a new cultures, I imagine. And I guess people probably don't understand that from that point of view, the Japanese culture, the focus and the importance placed on work and the working environment. You mentioned, if you choose a sport in school, that is the sport that you have to stick with. Now, from what one of my best friends is Japanese and lives in Tokyo. And, from what I understand is, whether it's a sport or a profession, in fact, it is very much that profession that you stick with for your whole life. And you are expected to, stick with something, persevere and become almost an expert in that. Does that mean like when we bring that back into the rugby world, when it comes to like changing positions in within a team or changing positions from a scrum half to a fly half to a winger, these sorts of changes, is that also quite difficult? Does that have the same kind of is that viewed in the same way as those kind of changes?
Yeah, I think there's an overlay to that though, because there's also the greater good, right? And there's doing my bit to make make teams successful. So a lot of people are prepared to sacrifice within that team. And if that means changing positions because coach needs me to change, then in the one way I'm open to it. But because change in Japan is viewed completely differently to my experience of change in Western. My HR background, I often worked in organisational change, and very much the perspective is, much like in the US, etc., hey, there's an opportunity to improve things. We need to move fast and make those improvements. And even if we're slow, others will take that opportunity ahead of us. They don't think that way at all over here. They think, well, if we are going to change, it better be worth the change. So don't talk to me again about changing it in next 5 years. So I relate that to changes in position, changes in game plan, and the experience these kids have growing up. It's just a completely way of doing things, and you've got to influence people differently about it. But yeah, I've seen a number of players change position, particularly through the body development that you get at university level, and on the whole, players have been open to it, and will just, with a huge sense of commitment, turn their focus on that skill set and start putting in unbelievable hours and unbelievable amount of time and into skill drills around picking up their game in that new position.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, mate, so we were talking about the differences in culture. What about this Japanese culture? How does it compare to back home in terms of, outside of rugby, food culture? I always do a segment about food because it is, to us rugby folk, it is a very important thing, and yeah. I know Japanese food is world famous, as I'm sure you're well aware of. Are you a big fan, or do you stick to, home cooked food with the missus or...
I'm an absolute fan. I mean, our training time 6 days a week, and we go mornings and nights. So you're not often getting a time out to eat outside. But whenever we do, on like a day off or the night before the day off, we're out and about enjoying it. Some of the food over here is amazing, and actually it's been bloody good for me. It's easy to beef up in NZ and way too many carbos and potato-based products, and over here there's some much better options. So I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what about kind of work-life balance? You mentioned 6 day weeks.
Yeah.
You mentioned night and day as well. We're talking that's some hard work for a rugby side as well. Is there kind of a risk of overtraining at times? Yeah,
I mean, it's certainly they certainly train for a lot longer and a lot more frequently than we do at home. And even in those high performance environments, like the full-time gigs, like your professional teams, Hurricanes, etc., looking at their menus for a week versus ours, we're putting in a lot more time. It's not uncommon for us to put in 4.5 to 5 hours a week on scrum work. When I've coached teams where the props would be giving me the big throat cut if I tried much over an hour 20, an hour 30 in a week.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I'd be probably not one of the first because I'm not one of the front rowers yet. But if I was, I'd be thinking, pulling the coach to the side after training and being, we can't be doing 5 hours scrums, coach, because I'm going to arrive at game time and I'm going to be struggling to give you 100% there. Is that an issue, or are the boys, 100% committed in everything they do? And because it sounds like a totally different culture.
It's shifting. So I think for years and years it was accepted, and it was the way they trained at high school and the way they trained at university everywhere, and probably the way they worked as well in terms of those types of hours and some of the stories that you hear. Top leagues definitely not like that. I've had good opportunity to go along to view some top environments like Kubota and Black Rams and that sort of thing. That's not the way they train. They train much more like you're describing in that Western experience. With a factor on how can we best present these guys not only skilled and adept around a game plan and ready to play, but also rested and able to give their energy to that game. A lot of the university environment's probably shifting, and I've even seen it shift. The newer coaching group I'm working with now, they've got a different view. It's more skill focused than that. That time on the job is still expected through the coaches. With the players, probably it varies from the the conversations I hear when they think the coaches aren't listening all the time. There's some who it wouldn't be uncommon for many Japanese students to feel like they need to thrash themselves and they need to go hard in contact. They need extremely long sessions to feel confident that they've done everything they can to actually prepare for the game. But there's others who go, hey, there's a bigger picture here. I'm knackered, I'm tired, I'm injured too often. Can we please look at another way?
And how's you mentioned the language barrier. How have you closed the gap at all? How difficult is Japanese?
I've closed the gap a bit, and I mean I try really hard with my older brain, I guess, and kind of the language facility changes a bit. It's easy in some ways in that a lot of the vowels and inherent sounds are quite close to Māori, with the a, e, I, o, u. So like a lot of that kind of makes sense to me, and I'm able to pick up some of the pronunciation. But yeah, it's definitely an area that I still have to work in. It's amazing how much you pick up though. I mean, I'm lucky within the rugby environment in some ways. Most of the professional top league teams, they'll have one or two translators sitting alongside a coach, and you can probably default to not learning the language if you're in an environment because somebody's there to do it for you all the time. We've got a physio who's very good at English, and we've got a number of players who are English capable. But again, some of them Tongans, so English is not a first language. They've come out of the islands themselves. So, I mean, it challenges you to make sure you've got some Japanese. I can certainly do all the important stuff outside of rugby, order beer and be polite where I have to be polite. I can do a little bit of my coaching. Yeah.
That's great.
Within the language.
I mean, I guess a big point there. Yeah, go on, Zach. Yeah, I guess a big point
around that though, haven't you? Because I mean,
exactly.
French in your time and English in your time. I don't know how you've done it.
Yeah, no, I've had a few different languages. Yeah, that's right, and it just proves, I think, your point there. Regardless of how hard a language is, I think as a coach especially, and as a player, you're going to get such a good reaction from the local guys if you dig in and if you put in the effort and if it's noticeable. I think that's like almost half the battle. I've had some guys on the pod before discussing some teammates who weren't so open to learning the language, and they end up sticking together, and it ends up creating a bit of a division within teams and things like that. If you muck in and you want to, it's like that attitude you're talking about. It's what am I sacrificing here for the team at the end of the day? And if you are seen to be putting in the hours, going to classes, learning the language, and you turn up at training one day and you're 3 or 4% better at speaking with the guys than you were last week, it's going to be noticed. And I think that's a real thing, even if it's unconscious team building. But I think it's such a key factor when we're talking about moving abroad, if it is to one of those countries that you have to learn a new language. Plus, it's a great string to the bow. When you finish your rugby career, if you finish your coaching career, having conversational level Japanese, that can only be a positive thing for your future career as well. And I think the same for players when they think about going abroad. I did want to ask you, what would be your advice for young guys, thinking about going abroad, leaving home maybe for an experience? Is it worth it?
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah, for all of the reasons that we've talked about today, it's much more than rugby, but then you've still got rugby, which you love at the heart of it, right? But, you're getting to meet different people with different views and learn about those different views that are out there in the world. And always not the only way, And within that, you learn about all of the things around language, around food, around even the physical environment that they house you in and that sort of stuff. And some of that stuff's different. All of it I've enjoyed, absolutely love, and I highly recommend it to everyone. And, to be fair for Kiwis, it's kind of a tradition in that, you do your time at home, finish school, some of you go to university or work a couple of years, and then traditionally you've gone off on the OE for this very reason, to kind of test your place in the world and experience what you can outside of your home environment.
Yeah, that's so true. And I wanted to ask, maybe, how accessible is Japan as a rugby option for people? Because from my experience, it's not the most accessible place. You mentioned having a few boys from the islands, maybe a couple of Kiwis, but are the Japanese focused on the development of their local talent? Is that something that they're much more interested in, rather than, the way I got out to New Zealand? I was a friend of a friend through the network, and I was suddenly in the midst of a new team where guys are. Does that exist in Japan? Can you just go over there and get a rugby experience? I'm not sure it's the same.
Yeah, I think you can in a very small part of the rugby environment, which is there's like a club competition as well. Other than that, if you're brought over through an agent in any way, either because you're a top high school player that they want to bring through to university level and need to give you Japanese first, or you're brought into top league, or you're brought into one of the women's teams within the professional leagues, all of that's quite structured, obviously. But yeah, there is a part of the environment where, you go and play for Hokkaido Barbarians up in Hokkaido is one of the famous ones. There's a couple of Kiwi guys involved in running that as well. People turn up and they have a great Japanese experience while getting to play rugby. Don't expect to be paid for it necessarily or supported in the ways that you would with a professional team, but still a great way to access the culture.
Not really. Yeah, it was more on that amateur level that I was referring to. That when I was 19 and came out to New Zealand, I was working for my bread, so to speak. I think in the old Cambridge hotel, I was working in there and living and probably a bit too much partying as well. I was going to say about what an amazing experience, and obviously I've got to give my thanks out on the pod. Back to you guys back in the day for opening my eyes to like a new. I actually had to mention a little anecdote from one of the team talks. I think it was my first Prems match, the first time I started. I think I started at 15, perhaps. So I was covering the backfield. Very rainy day. It was always rainy and muddy in Wellington, I remember, and we were sort of getting the game plan wrong. And you brought us together at halftime, and I still got this in my head. And I'd put a couple of low kicks through that had gone from in our half into the opposition 22, finding some good field position. And I think at that age, that was very natural to me, play territory, an English minded 10 as we would. But the other guys weren't so accustomed to this way of thinking. They just wanted ball in hand. It was these conditions that were just unplayable, but guys were trying to play all the skills out the back, one-handed offloads. And I remember you said you actually let me speak in the team talk, and I still remember this to this day. You probably won't remember it, but you said you asked me what my idea was, how should we be playing, and I remember being taken aback because I was just this 19-year-old kid, my first experience in the Prem team, and you gave me the floor basically, and you said how should we be playing, and I said to the boys, just a little bit more patience and let's use the kicks to the corner and kicks, and you said absolutely right. Whether I was absolutely right or not, I don't know, but you gave me that confidence to feel like I was a leader in the team in my position as just my first appearance. So I remember that to this day, and it's really stuck with me. So thanks for that, Syke. I just feel it's such a brilliant story. Yours is. Would there be any last things that you wanted to mention about your growth as a person from these kind of experiences and being able to travel the world with using the sport you love?
Yeah, I mean, just an amazing privilege, really. And you hear stories like that, and I guess as you go on, you hear a couple more of other people have mentioned to me at times during the coaching where they thought I got some stuff right or wrong or whatever. And I guess, one of the things that I learned early on was you do your first couple of years coaching in particular, and you finish the end of the season, you go, man, I learned so much this year, but I'm sorted now. You start the next year and you learn so much again. I've been coaching for 20 odd years now, and each year I still feel the same. And whether it's about the culture that you're in and you're getting the opportunity to play in a completely foreign environment, to help in a completely foreign environment, or whether it's, just another season, different edge of the competition with your home team, it's been great. So I've really enjoyed that privilege and opportunity to do it, and hopefully I can keep doing it for longer.
Awesome, mate. Awesome. And thank you for sharing with us, and thanks for taking the time out. I know you've got a bloody busy schedule, so it's much appreciated, and I'm sure some of your messages will be invaluable to some of our listeners. So yeah, thanks for taking the time out and joining us, and hope you guys enjoyed the episode too. Psych, I'll catch you soon, and hopefully for another chat.
Sammy. Stay well, mate, and keep up the great efforts, eh?
And you. Thanks, mate. Take care.
See you.
As always, thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast with your friends and fellow rugby lovers. You can find us on YouTube and all your socials, where we'll be posting updates about upcoming episodes and much, much more. Make sure to check out our other episodes, and if you haven't already, visit rugbyabroad.com to grab some awesome merchandise and help support the show. Until next time, I'm Sam Katz, and this has been the Rugby Abroad Podcast.
When you started talking about the story, I thought you were going to tell the one about Dan Keith. The one time I said, hey, look, you know, a motivation of the team isn't only up to me. I want you guys to stand up. And Dan goes, right, I'm going to do the pre-game talk this week. And he's stretching and he walks out. He always loved a proper. He walks out and throws these things up the ground. Everybody's going, what's that? And throws them on the ground and he goes, what are those, boys? And somebody picks one up and they're plastic spiders. And he goes, and one of the boys goes, spiders? Why, Dan? And he goes, because we're not here to fuck spiders.
Yeah, I remember that story.
I thought when you started talking about, oh my God, he's going to tell Dan Keith's fuck spiders story.
I could put it in now. We're still on record. I just realised. Fantastic story. Yeah. Fantastic. Oh, mate, cheers. I massively appreciate it. I'll definitely...
Good to connect again, Sam. Really pleased with how things are going for you. Hang in there, bro. If I can help in any way, let me know.